Today we're going to create a background for our winter fox landscape. We're going to be working with the art element of value, which means we're going to be using some light colors and some dark colors in our art project. So to begin, I'm going to draw 3 lines on my paper, which are going to be my 3 different hills. Each hill is going to be a different value. Some will be light values and some will be dark values. So to begin, I'm going to start with my top hill, and I'm just going to dip my big brush into some white paint, and I'm just going to paint side to side with some nice smooth brush strokes. Now I know this is sort of blending into my white paper so far, but that's okay. Once we start adding some black into our colors, it's going to look a lot different. So right now I'm just focusing on using lots of creamy paint so that my brush isn't making a scratching sound. If my brush is making that scratchy sound, that means I need a bigger dip of paint, or I need to paint more gently. So you can tell how many times I've had to dip back into that white paint just to fill my one hill. Now, after I've done my white hill, I'm going to start with my slightly darker values. When I mix colors, I always like to start with the lighter color first. And of course, white is a much lighter color than black. So I'm gonna go ahead and just brush more white onto the second hill. And it is definitely looking the same as my first hill at the moment, but I'm going to add a tiny bit of black while this paint is still wet. So I'm cleaning my brush, wiping it really quickly, and then I'm barely dipping the tippy tip of my brush into the black paint, and then I can kind of dot that all through it so that it will blend evenly. And even that teeny little bit of black changed my white a lot. So make sure that you don't start with a big scoop. You can always add more, but if you put in too much to begin with, it's really hard to fix it. If your white paint is starting to dry out a little too much, just add a little more water back into it, because that will help blend your black into it. Because dry paint is not going to blend very well. So it's kind of starting to get that scratchy sound for me a little bit. So that tells me I need a little more water to help keep my paint wet. Now I'm going to do the same step again with my last hill. I'm going to start by painting it white, and then I'm going to add in some black. This time, instead of getting a tiny scoop, I'm going to get kind of a medium-sized scoop, and I'm going to dot that through, because I'm trying to get this hill to be just a little bit darker than my first one. I don't want it to be totally black, but I do want it to be a darker gray. And that is looking pretty good to me so far, I think. If you feel like your hill did get maybe a little bit too dark, one thing you could do to fix it is clean your brush really, really good. Get another scoop of white and add that back on top. That will lighten your colors up just a little bit again. And I'm just gonna keep on going until I have that nicely blended in, and my 3 hills are all a different color. Now, when your hills are done, you have to do your sky. You get to choose what shade of gray you want your sky to be. If you want it to be sort of a stormy, dark day, you could pick a darker color, or if you want it a little bit lighter, you could choose that. It's totally up to you, but we're gonna do it the same way of starting with white and then adding our black in second. I had to use a lot of water to get my colors to blend nicely, but now I'm finally happy with my background and I can start working on my trees. When we do our trees, we're going to be using a tiny brush, because these are going to be some thin lines that we're working with today. So I'm just going to get my brush a little wet. I'm just dipping my tip of the brush into the black, and I can put trees on my second hill or my back hill. The first hill is going to be for the fox, so don't put any trees there. Now, if you are putting trees on the back hill, they are far away in the background, so I'm going to make them nice and skinny lines, very thin lines. So I'm just using my paintbrush to drag that black paint in a mostly straight, maybe slightly wiggly line up to the very top of my paper where they go off the top. These are going to be some tall trees today. Just add as many thin little trees as you want. I think they're kind of fun to do. And if you really like making these lines, you could also make a few skinny little branches go off the top as well. Now, after you have done your trees in the background, you could do some in the middle ground. Now, these trees on the second hill are going to be thicker and bigger because they are closer to us. So they start farther down on the page, on the second hill, of course, and I'm using more paint so that I can get a slightly thicker line. And I'm making it just a little wobbly on purpose. And I'm just gonna keep on going, doing my thin trees and my slightly thicker trees until I'm happy with the way my background looks. After you've added your background trees and then put your middle ground trees over the top of them, we're gonna leave our project to dry.